Oh, do come in. It seems we have another little puzzle on our hands, don't we?
Miss Marple and the Bonfire Night Murder, welcome to Mindful Musings. I'm your host, William, and I'm delighted you've joined us this evening. Before we begin tonight's tale, I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let me know your corner of the globe. Now, settle in with something warm to drink, find your most comfortable spot, and let us begin this mystery together. Chapter 1. Sparks Among the Straw. The 5th of November arrived in St. Mary Mead with all the anticipation that Guy Fawkes night traditionally commanded. Miss Jane Marple stood at her cottage window, watching villagers make their way toward the green where an impressive bonfire had been constructed over the past week. Atop the wooden pyramid sat the Guy, a scarecrow figure crafted by local schoolchildren under Miss Eleanor Hartley's supervision. Miss Marple gathered her coat and walking stick, having no intention of missing the festivities. Village events provided invaluable opportunities to observe human nature in all its fascinating complexity. The green was crowded when she arrived. Stalls sold hot chestnuts and toffee apples while children darted between adults with excited squeals. Miss Marple found Mrs. Bantry near the refreshment tent, her face flushed with organisational pride. "Jane, how wonderful that you've come," Mrs. Bantry exclaimed. "Everything is proceeding splendidly. The vicar will light the bonfire at 6 o'clock precisely." Miss Marple accepted the offered mulled cider, noting the safety precautions. A rope barrier surrounded the bonfire, and buckets of sand and water stood ready. Colonel Melchett surveyed the scene with military bearing, while Dr. Haydock chatted with Sir Henry Clithering near the beer tent. "The Guy looks remarkably realistic," Miss Marple observed. "The children did excellent work." "Miss Hartley supervised them beautifully," Mrs. Bantry replied. "They used old clothes from the church jumble sale. That coat actually belonged to poor Mr. Hargreaves before he passed." As 6 o'clock approached, the crowd swelled to nearly 200 people. The vicar stepped forward with torch in hand, offered a brief prayer, then touched flame to the bonfire base with dramatic flourish. The dry wood caught immediately, flames racing upward with surprising speed. The Guy, silhouetted against the growing inferno, seemed to move in the flickering shadows. Miss Marple frowned as the flames reached the scarecrow. The boots appeared to gleam with fresh polish, their surface reflecting the firelight. Before she could mention this observation, Miss Hartley screamed, "The Guy! It's moving!" The crowd's attention snapped upward. The scarecrow's arms flailed with unmistakable purpose, and a terrible muffled scream emerged from the burning figure. Colonel Melchett barked orders. Villagers rushed forward with water buckets while others used poles to dislodge the burning figure. 10 frantic minutes passed before the flames were controlled enough to allow rescue. Dr. Haydock knelt beside the pulled figure, his hands moving quickly despite the horror. After an eternal minute, he looked up and shook his head. "I'm afraid there's nothing to be done. Whoever this poor soul was, they were already dead before the fire reached them." Miss Marple moved closer, noting several details with automatic precision. The body was male, roughly dressed in shabby clothing, but those boots had indeed been freshly polished, the blacking applied with care. "Colonel Melchett," she said quietly, "I believe you'll want to preserve this scene carefully. I don't think this was an accident." Chapter 2. The Polish on Dead Man's Boots. The morning after the tragedy dawned grey and cold. Miss Marple rose early and made her way to the village green, where the bonfire's remains stood like a blackened skeleton. The body had been removed to the mortuary, but the scene remained undisturbed pending Inspector Slack's return. Dr. Haydock emerged from the vicarage as church bells chimed 8 o'clock. He looked haggard, having spent much of the night assisting with the preliminary examination. "Good morning, Miss Marple," he said, settling onto a bench beside her. "I might have known you'd be here at first light." "Good morning, Doctor. I trust your examination proved informative?" Dr. Haydock nodded grimly. The poor fellow was dead before the fire touched him. Blunt force trauma to the back of the skull. Death would have been nearly instantaneous. "How long before the bonfire was lit?" "Between 2 and 4 hours prior. I'd placed the murder between 2 and 4 in the afternoon." This was significant. The bonfire had been lit at 6 o'clock, meaning the murder occurred while the village green was busy with preparations. "Have you identified the victim?" Dr. Haydock's expression grew troubled. Despite the fire damage, I recognized him immediately. Arnold Finch, the schoolmaster who left 3 years ago after that financial scandal. Miss Marple remembered well. Arnold Finch had been accused of stealing from the school fund. Though nothing was proven, he'd resigned and left under a cloud of suspicion. "How curious that he should return now," she murmured. Inspector Slack arrived, striding across the green with brisk efficiency. Sergeant Lake followed with evidence cases. "Miss Marple," the inspector said with resignation, "I suppose you've already formed theories." "Merely observations, Inspector. I noticed the victim's boots had been freshly polished. The blacking was recent, applied within hours of the bonfire." Inspector Slack frowned. "What of it?" "Consider the circumstances. Mr. Finch returned to a village where he was unwelcome. Why take such care with his appearance? And how did he come to be dressed in the guy's clothing?" Sergeant Lake knelt to study the scene more carefully. The guy was moved to the bonfire at 4 o'clock by Timothy Griggs and his father. Someone must have switched the dummy for the body. "Exactly," Miss Marple confirmed, "which means the murderer had access to both the victim and the guy during a specific window, yesterday afternoon between 2 and 6 o'clock. The guy was displayed in the village hall until 4, Dr. Haydock offered, then transported and placed on the bonfire." Miss Marple held up her knitting. "You might also inquire about boot polish. The particular blacking used was Crown's Best, sold only at Mr. Petherick's shop." Inspector Slack made notes, beginning to take her observations seriously. "How could you identify boot polish on charred boots in the dark?" "The scent, Sergeant. Crown's Best has a distinctive odour due to its lanolin content. I noticed it when the body was brought down." "There's another matter," Miss Marple continued. "The original guy made by the school children. What became of it?" This brought everyone up short. In the horror of discovering the body, no one had thought about the displaced scarecrow. "We need to find that dummy," Inspector Slack said grimly. "It may contain evidence about how the substitution was accomplished." As the policeman moved away, Dr. Haydock remained with Miss Marple. "You believe the polished boots are significant beyond identification?" "Indeed. A man who polishes another man's boots reveals something about his relationship to that person. It suggests either intimate familiarity or very specific purpose. In murder, such details are rarely coincidental." Chapter 3. A Borrowed Torch and Its Owner. Sunday morning brought clear skies and the obligation of church attendance. The service was well attended, as tragedy always drew crowds seeking comfort or curiosity. The Reverend Leonard Clement conducted proceedings with appropriate solemnity, while his wife Griselda sat in the front pew, her pretty face unusually serious. After the service, Miss Marple approached the vicar with deliberate casualness. "Vicar, I wonder if I might ask about the torch you borrowed on Friday afternoon. I understand you required it for the church cellar." The vicar looked mildly surprised. "The torch? Yes, I needed to locate some old parish records. The electric lighting in the cellar is quite inadequate." "Why do you ask?" "Simply clarifying timelines. Did you return it to the vestry?" The vicar frowned. "I believe so, though I must confess I was rather preoccupied. I may have left it in the cellar. Would you like me to check?" They descended to the church cellar together. The vicar pointed out where he'd been searching, but no torch was visible among the clutter. "I thought I returned it," he said, troubled. "But my memory of that afternoon is confused. I was upset about a pastoral matter that had arisen earlier." "What sort of matter?" The vicar hesitated. "Someone came seeking spiritual guidance about a matter of conscience. I cannot reveal specifics, but our conversation left me quite disturbed." "This visitor came Friday afternoon, between 3 and 4? "Yes. The conversation lasted nearly an hour. This timeline overlapped precisely with when the guy was transported and when Arnold Finch was believed killed. Was this visitor male or female?" "Miss Marple, I really shouldn't—" "Of course, though Inspector Slack may ask the same question." They returned to the churchyard where Griselda Clement waited impatiently. After the Clements departed, Miss Marple's nephew Raymond approached. "Aunt Jane, I've been hearing interesting things about Finch's scandal. Pamela Reeves says her father always believed Finch was innocent, thought the real thief was someone with access to altar records without suspicion." Someone like the school board treasurer? Raymond nodded. Mr. Petherick, though there was never proof. Miss Marple spent the afternoon in contemplation. The vicar's borrowed torch troubled her. If he'd returned it, then someone else took the missing 6th torch. But if he'd left it in the cellar, it might still be found. More intriguing was the visitor seeking spiritual counsel during the hours when Arnold Finch was murdered. Someone with a troubled conscience, disturbed enough to seek religious guidance. Her reflection was interrupted by Mrs. Bantry arriving with a pocket watch. "Jane, you must come at once. I found this behind my sofa cushions. I've never seen it before." Miss Marple examined the gold watch carefully. Opening the case, she read the inscription, "To Arnold Finch, in recognition of 5 years' faithful service. St. Mary Mead School Board, 1947. This is Mr. Finch's watch, the one missing from his body." Mrs. Bantry's hand went to her throat. "But how could it be in my drawing room? I haven't seen Arnold Finch in 3 years. Did you have visitors Friday?" "Several. Mrs. Price Ridley in the morning, Miss Hartley around 2 o'clock, and the vicar stopped by around 3:30. Miss Marple examined the watch more closely. The mechanism still ran, though the time was wrong by several hours. The crystal was cracked, with traces of soot around the case edges. This watch was near the fire. Someone removed it from Mr. Finch's body after he was placed on the bonfire, but before the flames fully engulfed him. You mean someone robbed a burning corpse? Or realised they'd left distinctive evidence and quickly retrieved it? The question is why they chose to hide it in your home. Chapter 4. The Vicar's Peculiar Errand. Monday morning found Miss Marple at Petherick's general store, seeking information about boot polish. Mr. Harold Petherick arranged tins with mathematical precision, his thin face concentrated behind wire-rimmed spectacles. "Good morning, Miss Marple. What can I do for you?" "I was hoping to ask about Crown's best boot polish. Did you sell any on Friday?" His expression grew cautious. "May I ask why?" "Simply helping Inspector Slack with inquiries regarding poor Mr. Finch." "Terrible business. Though I can't say I'm surprised Finch met a bad end. A man who steals from schoolchildren has no moral compass." "The charges were never proven," Miss Marple reminded him gently. Petherick produced his ledger. "I sold 1 tin Friday afternoon, around 2:30. The customer was Miss Hartley. She mentioned needing it for some project." This was significant. Miss Hartley had purchased expensive boot polish shortly before Arnold Finch was murdered. Did Miss Hartley purchase anything else? "Just the polish. Rather unusual, actually." "Did you notice whether Mr. Finch had returned to the village before Friday evening?" His expression darkened. "I saw him Thursday afternoon, skulking around like the criminal he was. I mentioned it to my wife and to Miss Hartley when she came in Thursday evening buying supplies. She seemed quite shocked." So, Miss Hartley had known of Finch's return a full day before he was murdered. Miss Marple's next stop was the village school. She found Miss Hartley supervising the children's lunch break, looking pale and tired. "Eleanor, I understand you purchased boot polish from Mr. Petherick on Friday afternoon." Miss Hartley flushed. "Yes. How did you know?" "May I ask what you needed it for?" The schoolteacher hesitated. "It seems foolish now. I noticed the guy's boots looked shabby and thought they should be polished. I wanted our creation to look its best." "So you polished the boots yourself?" "Yes. Friday afternoon around 3 o'clock. I went to the village hall and spent about 20 minutes making them presentable." Her voice dropped. "I had no idea those boots would end up on a dead man's feet." "You knew Arnold Finch had returned. Mr. Petherick mentioned it Thursday evening." Miss Hartley nodded miserably. "I was shocked. I thought about trying to find him, but wasn't certain how he'd react." "Did you make contact?" "I wrote him a note Friday morning and left it at the Blue Boar asking him to meet me at the church at 3 o'clock. I wanted to tell him I'd never believed he was guilty." She paused. "But he never came. I waited half an hour, then went to polish the guy's boots and visited Mrs. Bantry to return her book." Miss Marple left deep in thought. If Finch received the note but didn't meet Miss Hartley, where had he been at 3 o'clock? And if he never received it, who else might have found it? At the Blue Boar, proprietor Josiah Slack confirmed that a gentleman matching Finch's description had taken a room Thursday evening. "Signed as A. Smith, but I recognised him. Kept to his room mostly." "Were there messages for him Friday?" Yes. A young lad brought an envelope Friday morning. I took it up myself and handed it to him personally. So Finch had received Miss Hartley's note, yet chose not to meet her. Why would he avoid someone offering sympathy? Did Mr. Finch receive any other messages? Any visitors? Not that I saw, though my wife handles morning duties. I did notice his room key was taken around 2 o'clock and returned within half an hour. Someone had accessed Finch's room Friday afternoon, just before his death. Chapter 5, The Merchant's Ledger, and a sale on Friday. Dr. Haydock appeared at Miss Marple's door that evening, looking troubled and carrying a small journal. Miss Marple, I found this among Arnold Finch's personal effects. Inspector Slack allowed me to examine them for the death certificate. He handed her the journal, open to Thursday, November 4th. The entry read, "Returned to St. Mary Mead after 3 years of exile. Tomorrow I will confront the one who destroyed my life and stole my future. They think time has erased their crime. They will learn otherwise. I have proof now, proof that cannot be denied. By Friday evening, justice will be done." Miss Marple read it twice. He came back for revenge. Indeed. The question is, who was he planning to confront, and did that person kill him to prevent the truth from coming out? The journal confirmed Miss Marple's suspicion that Finch's murder was not opportunistic, but desperate, an act by someone protecting themselves from exposure. Tuesday morning brought a message from Inspector Slack requesting Miss Marple's presence at the police station. She arrived to find him looking harried, but satisfied. "We've made progress. Based on your information about the boot polish and watch, I've been conducting interviews. This morning, Miss Eleanor Hartley came to the station and confessed to killing Arnold Finch." Miss Marple's eyebrows rose. "What exactly did she say?" "She claims she did meet Finch Friday afternoon, contrary to her earlier statement. They argued in the church vestry about the stolen school funds. Finch accused her of covering up the real thief's identity. She became enraged, struck him with a candlestick, and killed him. Then she panicked and conceived the plan to burn the body." Miss Marple frowned. "Did she explain how she transported the body, dressed it, and made the substitution entirely alone?" Inspector Slack looked uncomfortable. She was vague on details. Said she managed somehow. "And the polished boots, the missing watch." "The boots she admits polishing. The watch she claims to have taken and hidden at Mrs. Bantry's house to create confusion." Miss Marple sat in silence. "Inspector, I wonder if I might speak with Miss Hartley myself." In the holding cell, Eleanor Hartley sat calmly, hands folded. She looked up with sad relief. "Miss Marple, I thought you might come." "Eleanor, why are you confessing to a crime I don't believe you committed?" The schoolteacher's composure cracked. "What do you mean? I've told Inspector Slack everything." "You've told him a story, but not the truth." Miss Marple settled on the cell's chair. "Your confession contains several impossibilities. The vestry is visible from multiple vantage points. Moving a dead body from church to green would have been noticed. You had no way of knowing the watch would be discovered." Miss Hartley's eyes filled with tears. "You don't understand. I must confess. It's the only way to protect someone else." After a long moment, Miss Hartley whispered, "How did you know?" "Your confession is too carefully constructed to deflect attention from the real killer. You're sacrificing yourself for someone you care about deeply. I can't tell you who. I won't." "Then perhaps I can guess. You're protecting someone whose life would be destroyed by accusation. Someone who came to you in desperate need. Please, Miss Marple, don't ask me to betray them." Miss Marple rose. "I won't ask you to betray anyone, Eleanor, but I will find the truth." Chapter 6. A whispered confession in the vestry. Miss Marple left the police station convinced that Eleanor Hartley was protecting someone. The question was whom and why. She returned to Inspector Slack's office. "Inspector, I don't believe Miss Hartley killed Arnold Finch. Her confession doesn't hold together under scrutiny." Inspector Slack's face reddened. "The woman has confessed. What more do you want?" "The truth. Have you searched the church thoroughly, the confessional in particular?" "The confessional? Why would that be relevant?" "Because I believe the real killer went there after the murder, not to pray, but to hide something." With reluctance, Inspector Slack accompanied Miss Marple to the church. Mrs. Clement let them in and hovered anxiously as they examined the small wooden confessional booth. Miss Marple noticed the loose panel in the ceiling. "Inspector, if you would." Inspector Slack removed the panel, revealing a shallow space containing a package wrapped in oilcloth. He unwrapped it carefully, revealing items that made them both catch their breath. First was a ledger from the St. Mary Mead School Board, showing systematic alterations and sums diverted over 2 years. The handwriting was distinctive. Second was a bundle of letters addressed to Arnold Finch, documenting his investigation into the theft. Third was a paraffin-soaked torch, the missing 6th one. Fourth was a heavy brass candlestick, its base stained with blood. Inspector Slack examined the ledger grimly. The entries are in Petherick's handwriting. He was the school treasurer. He had complete access. "And the means to alter records," Miss Marple added. When Finch discovered the discrepancy, Mr. Petherick deflected blame onto him. But why keep these items here? He couldn't risk being seen with them after the murder. The bonfire was about to be lit, the green was crowded. The confessional was perfect, rarely used, completely private. Inspector Slack was already moving. "We need to bring Petherick in immediately." Harold Petherick was at his shop, counting receipts when Inspector Slack arrived with constables. "Harold Petherick, I'm arresting you on suspicion of murder." Petherick's face went white, then red with fury. "This is absurd. Finch was the thief. Everyone knows it." "Everyone believed it because you told them so," Inspector Slack replied. "But we've found the doctored ledgers. We know you've been stealing for years." "You can't prove anything." "Arnold Finch could prove it," Miss Marple said from the doorway. "That's why you killed him. He returned with evidence of your theft. You couldn't allow him to expose you." Petherick's bluster collapsed. He sank onto his stool, face in hands. "He was going to ruin me. Everything I've built destroyed because of some missing money." "Money you stole," Inspector Slack said firmly. "And when Finch discovered it, you let him take the blame." "When did he contact you?" Miss Marple asked gently. "Thursday evening. He left a note saying he had proof and would expose me unless I met him at the church vestry at 3 Friday. I thought I could reason with him, buy him off, but he was adamant. He wanted public vindication. So you killed him." "I didn't plan to. There was a candlestick on the table. We argued, he turned away, and I just picked it up and struck him." Petherick's voice was hollow. "It was over in seconds. Then I thought about the bonfire, about the guy, and realized there was a way to hide what I'd done." Chapter 7. Ashes and Alibis. The days following Petherick's arrest brought shock and satisfaction to St. Mary Mead. Inspector Slack asked Miss Marple to review his case file, a courtesy extended with evident reluctance but genuine respect. The physical evidence was substantial. The blood-stained candlestick matched Finch's wound precisely. The doctored ledgers showed systematic theft totaling nearly £800. Finch's letters documented his investigation thoroughly. The torch bore Petherick's fingerprints, along with paraffin traces. "The timeline is crucial," Inspector Slack explained. "According to Petherick's confession, he killed Finch in the vestry at 3 o'clock Friday, then spent the next hour preparing the body." "The wheelbarrow was key," he continued. "Petherick used one from the church shed to move the body through back lanes to the green. Several witnesses saw someone pushing a wheelbarrow, but thought nothing of it with all the bonfire preparations." "And the substitution?" "Remarkably audacious. Timothy Griggs placed the guy at 4 o'clock. Petherick waited until they moved away, then climbed up and made the switch. The operation took perhaps 5 minutes." "What became of the original guy?" "We found it in the church shed, stuffed in a burlap sack." Miss Marple nodded thoughtfully. "And the vicar's torch?" "Reverend Clement borrowed a torch at 1 o'clock to search the cellar. He returned it around 2. Petherick took it when he arrived to meet Finch at 3. That evening the Reverend Clement visited Miss Marple, looking haggard. "Miss Marple, I need your advice. You asked about my visitor Friday afternoon. I've been wrestling with whether my duty to protect that confidence outweighs my duty to assist investigation." He paused. "The person who visited me was Griselda, my wife. She was deeply troubled about something she'd witnessed Thursday evening. Harold Petherick following Arnold Finch through the village. She recognised Finch and noticed Petherick seemed to be tracking his movements. It worried her. "What did you advise?" "I told her to speak with Inspector Slack if she believed something untoward was happening, but she was reluctant to make accusations based on observation. We parted with the matter unresolved, which is why I was so distracted afterward." Mrs. Clement's testimony establishes that Petherick was already stalking Finch Thursday evening, which suggests premeditation. The vicar looked relieved. "Then I should encourage Griselda to speak with the inspector?" "I think it would be helpful, yes." After he departed, Miss Marple reflected that the pieces were fitting together. Petherick received Finch's threatening note Thursday, spent Thursday evening following him, and Friday planning his response. The murder was opportunistic, but the disposal was calculated. Only he hadn't counted on small details betraying him. The polished boots, the missing torch, the watch he'd tried to use as misdirection, and most damning, the evidence hidden in the confessional. The following morning brought news from London. Mrs. Bantry had contacted Mr. Carruthers, Finch's solicitor, who confirmed Finch had left a sealed envelope containing additional evidence. The solicitor opened it upon learning of Finch's death and forwarded the contents to Inspector Slack. The envelope contained additional ledger pages and bank statements showing exactly how Petherick had diverted funds. More significantly, it contained a letter from Finch dated Thursday, outlining his intentions and evidence. Inspector Slack was satisfied the case was complete. The evidence was overwhelming, Petherick's confession detailed, and witnesses could testify to various elements. Miss Marple, however, felt incompleteness. Something about the case still troubled her. Chapter 8. The Solicitor's Sealed Document. Friday brought unexpected complications. Miss Marple received a visit from Mr. Carruthers, who had travelled from London specifically to see her. "Miss Marple, I've come at Inspector Slack's suggestion. There's a complication requiring your particular insight." He opened his document case. "When Mr. Finch left this with me, he gave specific instructions. The envelope was to be opened upon his death and delivered to the person best positioned to ensure justice." He placed an envelope on the table. "It's addressed to you. Mr. Finch must have anticipated you would investigate his death." After the solicitor departed, Miss Marple opened the envelope carefully. What she read changed her entire understanding. "Dear Miss Marple," it began, "if you are reading this, I am dead. I hope you will forgive addressing this to you, but your reputation for discretion and insight is well known. I've returned to confront Harold Petherick with evidence of his theft. I've arranged to meet him in the church vestry at 3 o'clock Friday. I anticipate he will either confess or deny everything, forcing me to make my evidence public. Either outcome will vindicate my name. However, there is a complication. In investigating Petherick's theft, I discovered something else entirely. 3 years ago, there were actually 2 separate thefts. Petherick stole from the building fund systematically, but there was also a single large theft of £200 from the emergency fund. I did not steal this money, but I know who did. At the time, I said nothing because the thief was someone desperate, someone who took the money to escape an intolerable situation. I believed this person should not be punished for an act born of desperation rather than greed. However, when accusations were made against me, this person said nothing in my defence. They allowed me to take blame for their theft as well as Petherick's. I have struggled with this betrayal for 3 years. I have decided the truth must come out, but not vengefully. If I survive my confrontation with Petherick, I will speak privately with this person and offer them the opportunity to make quiet restitution. If I do not survive, I leave the decision to you. The person who stole £200 was Eleanor Hartley. She took the money to help her sister escape an abusive marriage. The sister has since remarried and lives happily in Canada. Miss Hartley has spent 3 years repaying the money anonymously through donations to the school. I enclose evidence of both thefts, separate and distinct. Use this information as your conscience guides you. With respect, Arnold Finch. Miss Marple set down the letter with trembling hands. Here was the missing piece. Eleanor Hartley's excessive guilt, her willingness to confess to murder, her strange behaviour throughout, all made sense now. She had committed theft 3 years ago, allowed an innocent man to be blamed, and lived with that guilt. When Finch returned, she must have feared he would expose her along with Petherick. Her note asking to meet him was motivated by fear, not support, but Finch had intended mercy, not condemnation. He understood why she stole and accepted her silent restitution as sufficient atonement. He'd planned to resolve the matter with compassion. Instead, Petherick murdered him before that meeting could occur. Chapter 9. The November Garden and its Whispers. Miss Marple decided to speak with Eleanor Hartley directly before making any decisions about the information Arnold Finch had entrusted to her. That evening, she called on the schoolteacher at her cottage. "Eleanor, I've received a letter from Arnold Finch written before his death. He told me about the £200 from the emergency fund." All colour drained from Miss Hartley's face. "He told you?" "He did. He also explained why you took it and how you've been repaying it." Miss Hartley covered her face. "I've lived with that guilt every day for 3 years. When Arnold was accused, I knew I should speak up. But my sister's safety depended on that money. Her husband was violent, dangerous. She needed to get far away, and I had no other way to help her." "Why didn't you explain this to Mr. Finch at the time?" "I tried. I went to him the day before he resigned and told him everything. He said he understood, that he wouldn't expose me, that my sister's safety was more important than clearing his name." Tears streamed down her face. He sacrificed his reputation to protect someone he barely knew. "And yet, when he returned, you were frightened of him." "I thought perhaps he'd changed his mind, that exile had hardened his heart. My note was a plea for mercy, not support." Miss Marple handed her Finch's letter. "I think you should read this." Miss Hartley read through tears. He was going to forgive me. After everything, he was still going to protect me. "What will you do?" Miss Hartley whispered. "Will you tell Inspector Slack?" Miss Marple was silent for a long moment. "Arnold Finch made a choice to forgive you and keep your secret. I think I must respect that choice. He asked me to use the information as my conscience guides me, and my conscience says his judgment was sound. You've repaid the money, lived with the guilt, and learned from your mistake." Miss Hartley broke down completely. "Thank you for understanding. However, the repayment must be completed and acknowledged, if only privately. I suggest you speak with the current treasurer and make a full anonymous donation for any remaining amount, with a letter explaining its restitution for an old debt." Miss Hartley nodded. "There's only about £30 left. I'll do it immediately." As Miss Marple walked home, she reflected on the complexity of human morality. The law would have judged Eleanor Hartley harshly, but Arnold Finch had looked deeper and seen a good person driven to desperate action by love. His forgiveness had allowed her to rebuild her life. Harold Petherick had stolen from greed, deflected blame onto an innocent man, and ultimately committed murder. The difference between the two crimes was vast. Miss Marple believed in justice, but also in mercy when mercy was earned. Eleanor Hartley had earned it through genuine repentance and restitution. Arnold Finch had recognised that and chosen grace. It seemed only right to honour his wishes. The weekend brought curious calm to St. Mary Mead. Petherick remained in custody. Eleanor Hartley made her final donation and slowly began rebuilding her equilibrium. Mrs. Bantry arrived one morning with another letter. "Jane, something strange has happened. I've received a letter from Harold Petherick." The letter, delivered through Petherick's solicitor, explained that he had been aware of Eleanor. Hartley's theft all along, had used it to his advantage, and was now attempting to ensure she didn't suffer additional guilt for his crimes. "He's trying to make amends," Miss Marple observed, "in his limited way." She decided to share this with Eleanor Hartley to ensure the schoolteacher understood the full picture. Miss Hartley read Petherick's letter with shifting expressions. "He knew all along. He let Arnold take blame for both our thefts." "Yes, but what's significant is that he's trying to ensure you don't blame yourself for his decision to murder Finch." "Should I feel grateful or horrified?" "Perhaps both. Human beings are complex, Eleanor. We're capable of terrible acts and noble ones, sometimes simultaneously." Chapter 10. The Fire That Cleanses Nothing. The trial of Harold Petherick took place in late January at the county assizes. Miss Marple attended each day, sitting in the public gallery with her knitting, watching as justice proceeded through its appointed course. The evidence was overwhelming. The doctored ledgers, blood-stained candlestick, torch with his fingerprints, hidden evidence in the confessional. Each piece was methodically presented. Witnesses testified to his movements, his accusations against Finch, and the systematic nature of his theft. Petherick testified in his own defence, admitting to theft, to deflecting blame, to the meeting in the vestry. He maintained that striking the blow with the candlestick had been done in anger rather than premeditation, hoping to reduce the charge to manslaughter. But the disposal of the body, the careful planning of the substitution, and attempts to mislead investigation all spoke to calculated intention. The jury deliberated less than 3 hours before returning a verdict of guilty of murder. The judge sentenced him to life imprisonment, noting that the deliberate nature of the crime and betrayal of public trust made leniency impossible. Miss Marple watched as Petherick was led away, shoulders slumped. His wife, who had sat stoically through the trial, finally broke down. Several villagers moved to comfort her, a gesture Miss Marple found heartening. Whatever crimes Harold Petherick had committed, his wife bore no responsibility. After the trial, Miss Marple shared a railway carriage back to St. Mary Mead with Dr. Haydock and Colonel Melchett. "A sad business from start to finish," the Colonel observed. "I never would have suspected Petherick capable of such things." "That's often the way with criminals of his type," Dr. Haydock replied. "They build facades of respectability while engaging in systematic dishonesty. Eventually the facade cracks." "At least Arnold Finch's name has been cleared," Colonel Melchett continued. "The man suffered terribly for a crime he didn't commit." Miss Marple said nothing, but thought about the complexity beneath the Colonel's simple statement. Yes, Finch's name was cleared of Petherick's theft, but the emergency fund theft by Eleanor. Hartley would remain unmentioned, known only to a very few. Was this justice? Miss Marple had wrestled with the question since burning Finch's letter. The law would say no, but Arnold Finch, the victim, had chosen forgiveness. Who was Miss Marple to override his judgment? Over the following weeks, life in St. Mary Mead gradually returned to normal rhythms. The school fund was reconstituted with donations from prominent villagers. Mrs. Petherick quietly left for Cornwall. Eleanor Hartley continued teaching, her secret secure and her conscience gradually easing. Miss Marple observed how communities absorbed tragedy and moved forward. The Bonfire night murder would become village lore, told and retold with varying accuracy. But the deeper truths, Eleanor Hartley's theft and Arnold Finch's mercy, would remain known only to those who needed to know. One evening in early March, as spring's first signs appeared in her garden, Miss Marple received a visit from Miss Hartley. The schoolteacher looked healthier than she had in months, with colour in her cheeks and lightness in her step. "I wanted to thank you again for everything you did, for honouring Arnold's wishes." "You've thanked me sufficiently, my dear. The decision was ultimately Arnold Finch's, not mine. Still, I want you to know I've established a scholarship fund in Arnold's name. It will help children from difficult circumstances continue their education. I've endowed it with my own savings and plan to contribute annually." Miss Marple smiled warmly. "I think Arnold would have appreciated that very much." "There's something else. My sister has learned what happened and feels terrible guilt. I've assured her she bears no responsibility for my choices. She wants to contribute to the scholarship fund as well." "That's very generous. Has she found happiness?" "Yes. She remarried 2 years ago to a kind man. They have a daughter now. She named her Jane, actually. Eleanor Jane." Miss Hartley smiled. "I'm visiting them this summer in Canada. It will be my first time seeing my niece." After Miss Hartley left, Miss Marple sat in contemplative silence. The ripples from the Bonfire night murder continued spreading, touching lives in ways both terrible and redemptive. Petherick's greed and violence had destroyed his own life and ended Finch's. But Finch's compassion had saved Eleanor Hartley and, indirectly, given her sister's daughter a better life. She thought about the fire meant to consume Arnold Finch's body and erase evidence. Fires were supposed to cleanse, to purify, to transform. But this fire had only revealed, bringing hidden truths to light. The polished boots gleaming in the flames had caught her attention and set in motion the investigation that exposed Petherick's crimes. Sometimes the very act of trying to destroy evidence became the most damning evidence. Petherick's elaborate plan to burn the body had been his undoing. A simpler disposal might have worked, but his desire to make murder appear as accident had created the details and inconsistencies that betrayed him. Spring was coming to St. Mary Mead, bringing renewal and hope. The village would heal from its wounds, though it wouldn't forget them. Arnold Finch's memory would live on in the scholarship fund, ensuring his life, though cut short, would continue making positive difference. Eleanor Hartley would carry his forgiveness, a reminder that redemption was possible. Miss Marple returned to her knitting, the familiar rhythm soothing in its constancy. Another mystery solved, another tragedy resolved as well as possible in an imperfect world. Justice had been served for some crimes, mercy extended for others, and the balance carefully maintained. The fire meant to cleanse nothing had instead illuminated everything. In that illumination, truth had emerged, complex, nuanced, and ultimately redemptive for those who deserved redemption. Outside her window, the early spring evening drew toward dusk. The village green, scene of recent tragedy, was peaceful now, with children playing and adults walking dogs in the lengthening twilight. Life continued, moving forward while carrying the past. Miss Marple set aside her knitting and rose to close the curtains against gathering darkness. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new mysteries to observe, new opportunities to see human nature in all its complexity. But tonight there was peace, and that was sufficient. The Bonfire Night murder was solved, its lessons learned, its dead honoured, and its secrets, where appropriate, kept. Miss Jane Marple had done her duty, both to the law and to higher principles of justice and mercy that sometimes transcended legal requirements. She had served truth, but not at the expense of compassion. Arnold Finch had understood this, and in his final act had demonstrated it. Miss Marple had simply honoured his wisdom and extended his compassion beyond the grave. It was a small thing, perhaps, in the grand scheme of human affairs, but small acts of mercy, accumulated over time, were what made civilization possible and life bearable. The November fires had burned brightly but briefly. The truth they revealed would endure far longer, shaping lives and guiding choices for years to come. That was the real legacy of the Bonfire Night murder. Not the violence and death, but the compassion and redemption that emerged from the ashes.